So we then had these great jobs at BMW. So I was told all you have to do is go to BMW, say you're English, Irish, looking for a job, everything's fine. So we walk up saying, we're British, conquered half of the world and everything else, we'd like a job at BMW. And they were like, we no longer hire Brits or Irish. And Adrian was looking at me like, you idiot, you got me to come here because of these great jobs. There's no jobs. What do we do now? So obviously we went for a beer. And and we literally had very, very little money. And we were at this campsite living illegally. And for a couple of days, we were walking around the streets of Munich, going to the telephone boxes. You know the public telephone boxes they used to have? And we were just checking if anybody had left any change. And we'd like get 20 Pfennigs or a Deutschmark. And one time, somebody had left 5 Deutschmarks, and we were so happy we went to the pub and bought 2 beers to celebrate. And then it was like, we need to do something. So we went to the British consulate and said, we're 2 able-bodied humans, British nationality, looking for a job. Do you have any suggestions? And they said, Hotel Sheraton, 5-star hotel, is looking for chambermaids, like people to clean hotel rooms. And we were like, but we're guys. And they went, that's all we have. And we were like, we can do this. So we went to Hotel Sheraton and we applied for the job. We got the job. We had these lovely little light brown like suits and everything else. We were taught how to clean a toilet. We were taught how to make a bed. And everything was fine. And they had a personnel house, like a hotel accommodation for staff, but it was full. So they put us in this 5-star room with 2 hairy Italians who were in the twin beds.
What were their names?
Enrico was my favourite, and we had these camp beds. So the 2 English were underneath the Italians, which is quite humiliating, as you can imagine. So we were doing this for like 2-3 days. And then one day I'm cleaning my toilets and I get a message to come down to the housekeeping department because they needed the room, and so they'd taken all our things from the room and put them in the conference room, and we would be sleeping in the conference room for a couple of days until they could sort things out. I mean, okay, not a problem. We went to the conference room, I saw my stuff, they'd packed it really badly, but fine. And then Adrian said, where are my baseball boots? They're not here. And the housekeeper was like, some English idiot, like, and he said, where are my baseball boots? And he got really quite angry because his baseball boots were his pride and joy. And he had a box of stuff, which was partially open. And they said, well, we don't know where your baseball boots are. Like, just go back to work. And he said, my box is open. And they went, so? And he said, my pet snake isn't here. I'm like, what? Instead of like, I have a pet snake, but you don't care about my baseball boots, but if you don't care about that, maybe you don't care about my pet snake, but it's not there. So he walked off, right? And they're looking at me going, he has a snake. And I'm like, and I said, Pete the Python, he's quite friendly. And they were like, and I was like, he's got. I said, yeah, Pete the Python. We've been together for a couple of years and stuff, and he's super nice. But yeah, he's gone along with the baseball boots. And so, if you like, I'll put a notice on the boards in English and German. If anyone has seen a snake, could they come to see Paul on the 14th floor or Adrian on the 15th floor? And I completely forgot about it. And I went up to my rooms, and I was cleaning my toilets, and then half an hour later, 3 housekeepers. There was like 1 housekeeper would control 2 floors. And I had 3 housekeepers in my room. And they were like, did you find your snake? And I was like, I mean, Pete's quite intelligent, but he doesn't know we're on the 14th floor, So, no, I haven't, And they said, we've closed down the kitchen. We're about to close down reception and call the zoo to come in. And I said, well, when you say it's my snake, it's not really my snake, it's Adrian's snake, and he's on the 15th floor. So they went off to the 15th floor, and about 2 minutes later, I heard the sound of footsteps running down, like this. There was Adrian running down, like, mate, we're in real shit now. And he said, I said, what? He says, they're going to call the zoo. What are we going to do? And as a true British friend, as we were in public school together in boarding school with the Jesuits for 8 years, I said, we? And he then went back to upstairs, and he told me, he said, they were waiting for him, really serious German kind of butch housekeeper. And he said, about the snake. And they said, where is it? And he says, you know that thing called British humour? We're quite funny, aren't we? And they went, there is no snake. I said, no, it was a good joke though, wasn't it? Did you like it? And they just turned around, went to the lift to go downstairs, just as I needed some fresh sheets. So I was on the lift in the 14th floor, and the lift opened, and there were these three of the most upset sort of like housekeepers. And I got in the lift, very, very tense, and they were like, there is no snake, is there? I said, good joke, that wasn't it? And obviously we were fired immediately, and that was that. And, but then a couple of days later, I was then living illegally on the... I got kicked out of the campsite, so I moved to platform 6 of the main train station. I was living there, and somebody had stolen my only pair of shoes. So I had no shoes and no money. So I thought, I've had 9 years of very exclusive public school education in one of the finest public schools in the UK. So what do you do when you're 19 with no shoes? You go begging. So I decided to choose the nicest part of Munich, on the U6 U-Bahn. There's a place called Kieferngarten, right at the top. Very, very wealthy sort of area. And I'm there with no shoes, and I'm just standing there like this, and I wasn't doing very well. And then I thought, maybe I need to be a bit more proactive. And what I learned very quickly was that if you approach somebody looking for money, they will pay you to go away. And so this was one of my first lessons. One of the most important lessons in life is how to overcome shame. And this is where I learned a lot of lessons. And so I went up and I said, in German, I'm really sorry to bother you. I've just come from England. I'm looking for a job. Somebody stole my shoes. Could you spare a mark? Here's 2. Fuck off, And then it was great, because then I was like practicing my German. And there was this... I was practicing my German, and I'll never forget this wonderful woman. She was like... I was earning about 15 Deutschmarks an hour, tax-free, flexible hours, more than I've earned ever since, actually. It was great. And, I could choose my hours, and everything was great. And then this woman, she was about 35. She had a pram and a baby. And I was trying to, come up with different ways to ask the same questions, so I could practice my tenses and my form of sentences and everything else. So I took this as a linguistic exercise, and I basically said, I've been in Germany for two days in your wonderful country. I'm trying to get things started with my life. I've had a few setbacks, and is it possible you could help me out with a Deutschmark or 2? And she looked at me, she just went, listen, honey, I've been in Germany 35 years and I've got no money. So that was my, and then the best thing in the world happened. I was going to have a beer with another chambermaid from the Sheraton, who was an English guy, the guy that never turned up in South America, which we'll talk about next. And I was waiting for him on this park bench opposite the Sheraton. There was another hotel behind, a 4-star hotel. And I'm sitting there on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 o'clock, with no shoes, waiting for my friend to go and have a beer or something. And this middle-aged, very well-dressed man sits next to me, German guy, and he says, why aren't you wearing any shoes? And I said, because it's Wednesday. And he said, what kind of answer is that? Like, tell me why you're not wearing any shoes. And I thought, so I told him the story of the snake, and he roared with laughter. He roared with laughter. And I said, it wasn't that funny. And he said, trust me, you don't know who I am. That was really funny. And I was like, who are you? He says, I'm the general manager of the hotel behind. This is the funniest story I've ever heard. And I was like, okay. And he said, so where are you staying? And I said, I'm platform 6 of the where when the police don't kick us in the morning, that's right. And he's like, you're sleeping at the train station? I said, well, yeah. And, you know, and you've got no shoes because somebody took, I said, yeah. When did you last eat? And I said, yesterday. And he said, are you hungry? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, let's go and have lunch. And I said, I'm not gay. And he said, I'm not suggesting that you are gay. I'm just going to buy you lunch because I'm a nice guy. And I was like, okay, it's a public place, so, you know, fine, so I won't have lunch. And then he said, I would like to invite you to stay at my apartment tonight. I've got a spare room and everything else. And I said, I'm really not gay. And he says, I know. So he even gave me a pair of pajamas and everything. I had this thing. And then he said to me, okay, here is 100 Deutschmarks. I want you to go and buy a pair of shoes. Tomorrow when you bought the pair of shoes, put on your best dress. Not dress, as it is, and go to the 8th floor of our hotel, to the housekeeping department, say I've sent you, and you will have a job. And so I did that, and I became the first male chambermaid at the Hotel Arabella Park Hotel. And I was there, I was so grateful to him that I spent 8 months of my life cleaning 2,810 toilets in my chambermaiding career. Wow. And it's where I met my first Croats, Barica and Barica. And they were these two Gastarbeiter from Yugoslavia back then. This was 1988. And they were just like, they'd work, and then they'd go every month for a weekend to. And a few months ago, I was putting some photos on Facebook about my past travels, just doing some promo for this book. And I came across a photo of Barica and Barica in their chambermaiding uniforms. And I put it on Facebook and I said, these are the first Croats I ever met. And I had a little story about how I was a chambermaid. Loads of likes, and then a comment. Barica 1 lives in this village just outside Zagreb. If you would like to see her, maybe we can connect and stuff. And so I haven't done it yet, but she wouldn't remember me, I'm sure, but that was kind of cool. So that was how I started. And now I'm going to have a bit of beer and...